Hi guys, if you're struggling to find a video that actually gives you a garden design and a planting schedule to work from, then this is for you. In this two-part plan, I'm giving you the tools I use to plan out and design my garden on paper, and also how I make a planting schedule that is super simple to follow and will keep me organized all season long. So everyone goes to Google when they want to do something, which is what I did when I was looking for plans and inspiration about the best way to organize and design my garden. And there's a lot of theory about what you should and shouldn't do. It's all really solid advice, but what I was looking for in particular was like a blueprint, a map that I could adapt to my own space. And then I wanted a guide for how to make it work. And so that's what I'm wanting to give you today. So we're going to go straight ahead and get into the meat of how to design your garden and how to practically lay it out, which I hope will help you if you're starting from scratch, or if you're wanting to redesign your growing space, or if you're just wanting to add things to an already existing space to give it a bit more spice. So you're basically going to draw it out on paper. And I find that this paper with the little squares on it is really handy. So you're going to start with a shape. And I'm using a square because I think that most people are familiar with the concept of a square or a rectangle to grow a garden. And most people can fit a square into their outside space, whether it's a big one or a small one, based on where you live. But honestly, use a shape that's going to work for your garden space. It can be a circle, it can be a triangle, but for me, I'm going to use a square. Well, it's actually more of a rectangle because it keeps things simple. So before you get busy with your paper, you want to go and stand in that space that you've identified for your garden. You want to take into consideration the line that the sun takes over that space, as it's going to play a role in how you both design and plan what you want to plant and where you want to plant it. And then also consider if you have any large shade trees around, because that's going to affect the amount of sunlight that hits the plants that you're wanting to grow. Next, you want to measure the space roughly in feet and stand in the space and get a feel for how far it is from the house or from your kitchen, how far it is from a water source, or how far you need to carry things like when you're harvesting or bringing in supplies, because these are all sort of things that as you get into your garden, you're going to realize are important considerations for where you place the garden to start with. Okay, so once your area is defined, we're going to put in some structures. Now, you can plant your garden all in the dirt, which is in-ground growing. You can till up the whole square and plant it all in rows, just like you would see in an allotment. And that's fine, there is nothing wrong with that. But that is not my style of gardening. So for me, just to give a bit more idea to where I'm going with this, a garden needs to be more than just a place of production and function. So I want to incorporate elements into my garden that give it a sense of beauty and interest, a place of enjoyment and abundance. I love to be in my garden, and so I want it to be a place that energizes me, not just a place where I go and look around and see how much work and weeding that there is to be done. So with that said, there are 4 different structural elements that I want to incorporate into my garden. And these don't all have to be done in your first year. This, I want you to think of as the big picture garden. And so you'll keep adding to it year after year. So those 4 elements are firstly your planting beds, where you're going to physically put your plants. And there's different types of planting beds. Then we're going to look at pergolas and trellises, so growing structures. We're going to look at having water and water source and water features. And then lastly, we're going to look at pathways. So this is the fun part. You can map out whatever you like on paper and really get as creative as you want. And if you get a little too overboard, you can always rub it out and start again or scale it back. One design tip that I am going to give you is this. If you're going for beauty in your garden, focus on using structures to create symmetry. Don't ask me why, but you will find that when you look at images of gardens that you like, you're more likely to be attracted to the ones that had a sense of symmetry and order to them, as well as the diversity. So symmetry is key in planning a garden design if you're going for something that is stunning and beautiful. Okay, so you want to first map out your planting beds. And we have these 3 raised beds here at the front, which I started with. And then we have in-ground rows, which we matched either side to keep things symmetrical. And the sun runs from east to west across our garden like this. So that's why that my rows run from east to west, so that I don't create too many areas of shade. And after that, I wanted more planting beds sort of dotted around, and I wanted to add trellises and arches to give me options for vertical growing. And also this year, I'm going to be adding some wigwams for some more, a different type of vertical growing. So you first off might want to consider the materials that you're going to use in creating your planting beds, because this is also going to affect the overall look and feel. I've seen some really beautiful beds made out of galvanized corrugated tin. I've seen pallet wood beds, I've seen log beds, I've seen beds edged in or made entirely from store-bought timber, and they all give a different aesthetic. So what you build your garden out of is going to affect the overall design. You can also combine them like us and go for a bit of everything. I'm adding some additional raised beds this year, which are actually fire pit rings that I found at Tractor Supply, and they're going to accommodate some of the larger perennials that we want to grow that need a bit extra space. So next you want to add in the vertical dimension to your garden. So we're talking about trellises and climbing frames and pergolas. I think as I just touched on those, there are so many beautiful ideas if you look on places like Pinterest. So as I said at the beginning, one of the important aspects of my garden is to give me a sense of joy, and it's got to be somewhere that I love being, that energizes me and creates a sense of being where I can take a seat and just relax or enjoy and read a book or just to sit and pray. So last year I bought a very cheap and nasty looking pergola. It looked a lot better online, like a lot of things do, than it actually did when it arrived and I built it. But I've sat and thought about how I can use it and disguise it a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it into the garden and position it here. So this will be a shady spot where I can have a seat and a table and perhaps a little potting bench, and keep my watering cans there and a few things for transplanting. And what I'm going to do is disguise it a bit by using it as a big vertical climbing frame where I might grow some clematis or wisteria or something pretty and vibrant up the sides of it. So speaking of vertical growing, something else that I have been thinking about is giving dedicated spaces for growing vines and growing climbing plants and plants that both need support, but then other plants that actually take up a lot of ground space. And so in those places, I've added trellises and archways. We've got some flat panels and some frames. And as I mentioned, this year we're also going to be adding wigwams. So you can see on here that we've got archways here and here. And then down these 3 rows, we've got a simple rail trellis, which you can use with string. I actually have a video on that. And the trellis system's been very versatile, so you can go check it out. I've grown cucumbers on it. beans and tomatoes with great success. And this year, I'm going to be adding raspberries and goji berries, which I think down here, which actually needs support. And then over on this side, I've got flat panel trellis. And then here, if you can see, this is where the wigwams are going to go. I may put raised beds around them, but they don't have to be. And this year I'm going to be growing some beans on the wigwams and some sweet peas as well. So once you have an idea of what you want to plant, and that's the next phase, then to actually plan out where you're going to grow those things based on what support they need is a big part of your garden design as well. So once you have these structures in place, you want to establish where your water source is coming from, or if you're putting a water feature in your garden, where that will go. So we have got an old stock tank that we actually dragged out of a dump, and we're going to turn that into a small pond. I will say that if your intention is to create a mini pond in your garden, place it in an area that gets full sun, because the more sunlight and oxygen that you can get into the water, it means the less algae and the less bacteria. So I want to place a big tank of water where I can dunk my watering can. I'm hoping we can catch rainwater in there, which is why I've put it quite close to the pergola. I want to try my hand at growing water lilies and other aquatic plants. And also it's a place where I can invite birds into the garden, a place to drink from. No doubt our ducks will find a way to get in there if they can. And let me know in the comments if you've seen any inspirational ideas for repurposing containers to create small ponds, or even if you've added a functional water system or water feature in your own backyard. I'd love to hear about the ideas that you have. So lastly, once you have the basic layout mapped out, you can put in your pathways. Now, pathways are not something that you have to have, but I do think that they can help define sections in your garden. They also can help to keep weeds down, and obviously when we have a lot of rain, we can get a lot of mud, and so they can also be a dry place to walk when the garden is wet and muddy. So pathways can be created just out of mulch, or they can have a top with gravel on top, or even just using stepping stones, which I've seen done actually with sliced up logs, or again then purpose-built pavers. And how you create your walkways is all down to budget and the time that you have. However, again, what I've done here, and what we might add some more, but we've put in pathways to create a symmetrical shape of paths that have a purpose. So they both lead into and out of what I suspect is actually going to be the most frequently walked areas of our garden because of these two structures that are in place. Okay, so once you have your map of the garden, the next part is making a solid plan of what goes where and when to plant and then when to harvest. So you're going to want to consider your long-term plants, like your perennials, if you're putting fruit trees in or bushes, and then things like your long season crops, like your root crops and your annual vegetables. And I didn't want to make this video too heavy with information, so I decided to split this topic into two parts. And so in part 2, I'm going to be sharing with you the details of my planting schedule that I've created to keep things super simple to follow. And it's all based around a wall calendar that has a secret little helper, which you'll have to watch the video to find out. So I don't know if there is a way to do this, but I would love to see pictures of your garden plans that you create. I'm on Instagram. You can find me at the Little Palette Farmhouse. But if you do post your garden plans online anywhere, be sure to leave a link in the comments below, because I think one of the best ways to get ideas is to crowdsource from other people who are also being creative, and we can be creative together and share the resource. So stay posted for part 2 of this video, and thank you for watching.